Okay.
Your 10 seconds was up.
We haven't used that feature in a long time. that I can think
We're good,
of.
okay. Welcome back to our work
I didn't know
meeting.
they-
We will carry on with item 2.4, discussion regarding e-collars. Anthony?
I guess just as a little history to this, as you guys remember, we talked about this a few months ago as we were going through the general parks ordinance
This
updates.
is Sherry's fault.
Yeah. Anyway, we were trying to come up with a method to credential dogs to be on e-collars while they were on the trail system, right? That was the whole intent behind this. In our efforts, we had really exhausted our efforts, reaching out to different organizations, different companies that do training. And ultimately, what we came back with was the Canine Good Citizen Program, which is offered through the American Kennel Club. In talking with Debbie and Animal Services and our legal department, we felt like this was the best option that we could find out there. So I was prepared tonight to bring this back to you guys and talk about it, get your thoughts on it, knowing it probably wasn't the ultimate, I mean, not the best option, but maybe an option that would work for what we wanted, right? Most of you, I think you were all on the email that was sent out yesterday from Charlie.
Right.
Okay, is everybody apprised of this email? You all got it?
Yep.
Okay, so essentially he's saying this probably isn't the best option, for credentialing, dogs to be on e-collars. I've had another conversation with him, after he'd sent this email out. I called him and we had a conversation. He is actually a representative back east. Somehow a resident here saw this on the agenda, called him. I don't know why they called him, or maybe it's a personal acquaintance, I don't know. But they called him. He's over a region out in Pennsylvania on the East Coast. But he called and talked to me and said he was gonna reach out to some colleagues out here, or even some different organizations out here that maybe would be a better fit. He wasn't sure if there was something that was a better fit, or something that is specific to e-collar training. But he was gonna reach out to some people and get back to me within a few days. I haven't heard back from him yet, but we'll give him a week or two, I guess, and see what he comes up with. He was gonna put me in contact with the AKC representative over this region, and he said she could help me as well. So, just to clarify too, we did reach out to local AKC chapters prior to, wanting to bring this back to you. The Canine Good Citizen Program, we didn't hear back from anybody. We never, were able to get a response from email or get a hold of anybody by phone. So I feel like we tried to do our due diligence here in this process, with not receiving any feedback or any response from anybody. We felt that this was the best option, and we're prepared to bring it back to you. So that's kind of where we sit right now. I just wanted to give you a quick update there. We can wait and see what Charlie brings back, or what resources they have and could come up with, if there's any other organizations or programs out there that would better fit our situation here and what we're trying to accomplish. Or if you guys want to, I guess, move on without it, we can do that as well. We could keep the verbiage as we proposed in the ordinance, just saying that physical leash is required, or we could go back to permitting an e-collar without the certification. So there's different options.
So I have I haven't found anybody who's doing an e-collar, just in a quick Google other cities, who's doing this. I have some concerns about the liability we might be taking on if we permit something like this and then something happens with a physical leash. If they're not on the leash, it's that property owner or that dog owner should have done that. We told them to do it. If we permit this and then something happens, I do have some reservations. I think the council needs to think through that. I know we were approached by a citizen, hey, I would like you to do this. I think there is some liability if the city starts to borrow.
I don't disagree with any of that. And thank you so much for looking into all this. Like I said, I had looked into it. There was the city, I sent you that little ordinance thing that they had, and it's like, well, maybe this will work, but maybe it won't, you know what I mean? Maybe we have to look at our liability, how much exposure we have. But I just didn't want to shut the door on it without making sure that we had done a good job of looking into it.
Oh, absolutely.
So I wouldn't mind if you guys are okay with it leaving open for a couple more weeks and see if they actually get back to you with some sort of thing. And then we can evaluate it and say, does it cover our exposure or does it not? And then we make that informed decision. Are you okay with that?
I'm great with that. I know Debbie had a few things she maybe wanted to say. She had some
Perfect.
concerns as well, so I'll let her speak a little bit.
And just in regards to the e-collar, what we find that people that are using the e-collars now, that, we see their dogs off leash. And whether they become certified, whether we allow that, we're gonna have other citizens that don't realize they're on the e-collar
And think they're just off
and
leash.
think they're off leash and that it's okay to do that. I have had circumstances of people being bit by dogs on e-collars because the owner doesn't feel the dog pulling to lunge toward the person and they don't know about the dog biting the person on the bike until after the bite had happened.
Sure.
So there are a lot of concerns about having dogs physically off leashes
No, I appreciate that, for
in
sure.
the parks. The other thing that Charlie recommended too would be to adopt the ordinance they have in Mill Creek where we have odd days off leash out in the unimproved canyons, not on the improved trails.
Right.
And then even days on leash so that those that are biking and walking dogs know when they can and can't go.
Well, that's a cool idea. That way it kind of leaves an option, but everybody's informed of. Yeah, I haven't heard of that. That's a cool idea.
Yeah, that's
How
a
do you
Mill
feel about
Creek.
that?
My understanding is that it's not perfect, though.
No, it is
Right.
not perfect.
Didn't you work up in Mill Creek?
I worked for the
Yeah.
Forest Service for like 3 years and it was really hard to enforce and people were, has to be communicated very well and it's still a
Yeah.
It is, the easiest thing is to just enforce
The leash.
responsible ownership and being on a leash.
I was a canyon patrol sergeant, and it was not fun in Mill Creek. About the same time you were there, Blake. It was not fun trying to keep track of that.
That email that he sent was pretty informational, because it was talking about the purpose and use of collar tools, right? And that's, it's not
a
for,
training, not a control.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Philosophically though, I think I like the idea of us removing that decision and the liability of that decision from our ordinance and leaving that on an individual dog owner. If they choose to take their dog off leash, they're responsible solely for whatever happens. If we have a ordinance and it allows that and something happens, we're putting ourselves in the mix of what's safe and what's not, and
Let's see what he comes back with.
Just, it's a couple
So,
weeks.
so if he, I guess hypothetically, if he doesn't come back with anything, he says there's no real good options out there, are you okay with us bringing back the ordinance just with a physical leash
yes.
with that verbiage? Okay,
Yes.
great, thank you guys.
Thanks, Anthony.
Whoever's doing this.
Thanks, Anthony.
Hey, 2.5, pothole repair and pavement and the roof.
I don't know what you're talking about, potholes. I
For-
haven't
for a
really
whole day,
complained about it.
Yeah, it was actually somewhat asked by council to kind of give. So Ed was here, as you saw, and he's had a very long day. And so I send him home, and he'll be up again early in the morning to start sending crews out. So you're gonna hear from myself and maybe Monty and Bryce. So
Just, there's something about, I can't remember. I was like, I went on vacation, I forgot.
So moving forward, just a few things about potholes, what causes them. Obviously, they begin with imperfections in the asphalt. It allows water penetration, and that can cause a multitude of things, whether the water penetrates into the structural base and starts softening it there, or it also allows freeze and thaw cycles to, obviously impact the road, and then traffic loading as they drive over it continues to pop and loosen that, and then that's how essentially they are formed. As we go to do repairs, there's several things that limit how we can repair those and how we go about repairing those. Obviously, frequency of storm is a big one. If we have storms that are gonna be occurring, every 2 or 3 days, it's difficult to get out there and do those repairs because as you'll see, we have, snow and ice in those, they're wet. And to get a proper repair, that makes it difficult. Temperatures also impact when you can, effectively do, pothole repair, and then the moisture, whatever's left, we need to try and get out and then use tools, blowtorch to be able to heat that area up so that it's not frozen, and then allow whatever material we're putting in to be able to adhere to the asphalt that's there. And then obviously traffic control is a big one, and then also availability of crews, right? Cause they're out cleaning up snowstorms and pushing snow back, and then, we had multiple crews of different departments coming in to help our streets department with pothole repairs as they're continuing the snow removal. And then just a couple types of repairs that are typical. More of a temporary patch is using a cold patch material. Those typically only last a couple or a few storms, because they're temporary, right? They're not meant to stay in. After you get a few storms come through, freeze thaw cycles, and then obviously snow plows, it's easy for them to come out. And then permanent hot mix, that we'll talk a little bit more also, it can last several years, and more of a permanent patch. So here's just a few pictures. You can see the pothole on the left and the repair. They're using cold patch in that repair. You can see obviously the snow and ice and water in this hole and debris that needs to be pulled out. And then we haul out cold patch, shovel it in, shovel it into the hole, and then tamp it down either with a hand tamp or, we might use a vibratory compactor or something, but this is typically how those are.
How expensive are those versus the other?
So this is obviously a lot cheaper than the other material, but it's also temporary, right? We'll have to go
Yeah.
back out multiple times to fill this, so.
It's still probably pretty expensive, right?
Yeah, it's fairly expensive, and it usually comes in bags, or we can go by bulk. Just depends on what is available, right? But yes, it is fairly expensive to have to purchase that material. And then here's kind of a couple other shots of some potholes that we see. A lot of this is just surface treatment that is popping up as the moisture gets under there. And on the right, just kind of shows traffic control. And then this is the more permanent pothole repair. It's a gap patch machine. It has a hopper, it heats material. It uses a asphalt emulsion, with a 1/4 inch aggregate in it. It heats it up, is more like a hot mix asphalt, which is more of a permanent repair.
Do we own that or we rent it?
So we have just recently purchased this. This exact machine, we was able to rent it, and in the staff report, I kind of talked about the difficulties of renting them, competing with other agencies to get these, and it's very difficult to get them. UDOT obviously takes a high priority. And so we were fortunate enough to be able to get this. It's a used machine. It's only a couple years old and still in good condition. The representative that we're purchasing it from, once we're done using it now, take it back, make the repairs on it so that we actually get a repaired machine back in good working order. So we're able to keep this machine. It's around $75,000, but in the long run, it's going to make a more permanent patch and save us, time and money in the future. I was trying to get a video to work earlier today that Ed sent me, but it wasn't working, so I was hoping to show you a video of it in operation, but I wasn't able to
Nice
make
seeing
it
as
play.
I've seen it.
Yeah. Yeah, it works really well.
Yeah.
Here's some photos of it in action. You can see it lays down a fairly smooth patch, and then they use hot tools to go back over the top, which seals the pothole repair and repels water. Those are the bricks here on the left that you basically just throw that right in the hot pot and it melts everything down. And is able to screed over the top, so.
But it seems like it will pay for itself, like if putting in those temporaries and popping them out all the time, all the money doing that will be able to pay for this.
Yeah, and it's obviously less crew time to go out and make these
Yeah.
repairs, right? Cause it takes a little bit longer to do these repairs, but we're not out there several times a year making them. So there's no doubt in the long run, it will save us money and give us, better roads, to work with, so. I think that was it on the potholes. Monty, did I skip anything, or does council have any questions in regards to those? I know this year we've seen a lot of them.
How would you answer the question? How come every other city's got all their potholes fixed and Harriman's potholes?
They haven't been
Haven't
driving
been
through any other city.
Yes.
And
You say, let me get back to you.
Drove through two of them today and they had potholes.
We've had streets that just
Driving
blew
here.
apart.
yeah,
I mean, and I think
we've had
So
some
many
bad stuff,
cities
right?
have.
rough winter.
this winter's been rough, and it's been rough for everybody,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's, as we talk to other cities, I mean, this is an abnormal year for potholes. It just really is the frequency of storms, and then you have the warm temperatures one week and super cold temperatures the next. You know, the freeze thaw cycles wreak havoc on the asphalt. So this is definitely an
When were
abnormal.
the warm ones?
Trying to 32 degrees.
Yeah, it went above freezing.
I've tried to take the approach that you can have a scramble drill and go out and throw down a bunch of cold patch on stuff that is gonna just have to be fixed again and again and again, 8 times over a winter. And you waste all the taxpayer money doing it that way, instead of just getting it fixed, the conditions have to be right for that fix to take place.
They do, yeah.
And we haven't had a lot of windows of that.
There hasn't been. And,
Is there
you know,
a difference in temperature between cold patch and the emulsion?
It's about the same, cause you want the asphalt temperature to be at a temperature that it will take, and obviously sometimes we can't wait for temperatures to be high enough, so we go out and do the best we can. Like I said, we'll use blow torches to heat the asphalt before we put the patch material in. So we'll do what we can, but if it's down in the teens, you know, like we had for several there in the 20s, it's difficult to get a good pothole patch.
Was it supposed to be 50?
Well, to lay asphalt, like if we're laying a new road, it needs to be 50 and rising. But this material, you know, it has some additive chemicals in it and things like that, which allow it to be used. But obviously, the colder temperatures, you know, the less effective they're going to be.
Another thing to be aware of also is that machine on really cold days, it takes a while to heat up to temperature.
Oh, I
So
bet.
we can fire that machine up in the morning, and if it's really cold down in the teens or below, it can take hours for it to bring it up to temperature for us to even be able to go out and use it.
Yeah, so
So it's really inefficient when it's super cold outside.
Yeah, we'll
It's
pull,
temperature.
we'll move things around in the shop so we can actually put it inside, so it's somewhat of an indoor temperature. So, and we'll keep the material indoors, as much as we can, so that
So you
it's-
say you need a bigger shop?
The truck that moves outside is a Vector and it has water lines in it,
Yeah.
so you can see that that's a problem with it out.
Agreed, yeah.
Remember that budget conversation I just had a little bit ago? Yeah.
I'm just reading between the lines there.
Well, thanks for trying
There's a
hard.
lot.
It's been a nightmare this year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's been rough for everyone.
On the
Yeah.
roads and snow and potholes and everything.
The nice thing is when I transitioned into another city, I don't go, oh, their roads are perfect.
It's been rough on everybody, just that.
Everybody we talk to, they're struggling.
And thanks for your report earlier on trucks in and out and everything that's going on.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yes.
Yeah, good job. You guys are doing a great job. This has been a rough year.
Yeah.
Snow plows, roads, everything. Good job.
All right, so moving on, thought we'd give you kind of an update on our pavement preservation program. We have obviously, that's something we've been putting a lot of time and effort into and has been brought up a lot over the last, several months. So we wanted to kind of give you a insight onto our program a little bit and then show you kind of what we've done in the last few years and then looking forward a couple of years on what we're gonna be doing with projects. And obviously some of the goals there, the big one is the right treatment on the right road at the right time. That's something that's pushed throughout the industry. You go to every conference and that is a saying that comes up all the time, right? Not every road is the same. And then also, moving on to some of our goals that we'll talk about is, trying to preserve the good roads, the fair and good roads, right, that we have now. In an effort to try and maintain or improve our overall pavement condition index, the PCI. And then just a few things on the outline. Obviously, we did a pavement analysis a few years ago in 2019. I think we have another one coming up in a few years. After our fiscal year 24 treatment projects. And then one thing that we have done that's a little bit of a change based on some discussions with the consultant that we work with regularly is trying to get that first initial treatment down within 3 years of the new road, helps preserve it. And then you can do your 6-year treatments after that as type of an average, 5 to 6 years, depending on the condition of the road. But that's one thing that we've done. It's a fairly inexpensive initial treatment, but it adds years to the life of the road, putting that initial treatment down. And then obviously there's different treatments for the different classifications of road, whether it's an arterial, collector, or residential road, we use different treatments. And then actually you look at the actual pavement condition, we refer to the PCI that was given to us in that study, and then we'll adjust our treatment based on the actual conditions. So we're putting down the right treatment. We try to perform crack seal and patching prior to the treatment, rather than after. Sometimes we're able to get out and do that ahead of the time with our crews, and other times we have to get the treatment down and we'll go back and do it afterwards. But our initial goal is to get the crack seal and patching done prior to. And then again, the goal is to repair the failing roads once we feel like we've caught up to maintaining our good, fair and good roads, and then put money into those failing roads. So here's just a diagram of the PCI. You've seen this before. Obviously, on the left, you have basically the PCI, and then you have the years of life. And so, with us, applying these treatments at specific times, as you can see there, roads are typically designed to last around 20 years. That's the general industry standard for road design. But if you can put treatments on there, with, essentially pennies on the dollar, you can extend the life of that road, 40, 50 years before eventually every road is gonna need to be reconstructed at a time. But if you can push those more expensive treatments off as long as you can, you'll get more out of that road with some of these treatments, so.
Remind me again what our aspirational number is for the PCI, like citywide.
So our citywide, and I was chatting with Bryce about this a little bit earlier, we obviously want to keep it what it is now, which is around a 70 average, or that's what it was in 2019.
7, right, okay.
It was around a 70. Now, that's actually a really good PCI number, but we have a lot of new roads, right? And so the PCI number is, I don't want to say artificially high, but it is high because of the number and miles of new roads we really have that are less than 10 years old. And so as we get older, our target PCI will probably drop a little bit from that 70, just because our roads will be aging. So, a good target is somewhere around 60. If you can get an average is a good number for, a city that, is, 40, 50 years old.
So one thing to also think about, PCI is a great engineering number, it's a great tool for us, but the average citizen is really more concerned about drivability. And so PCI,
We talked about that,
PCI comes from all sorts of different, you can have a road that's kind of rough but has a decent PCI because of the way the PCI numbers are come together, the way the matrix that creates it. So while PCI is a great number and we'll use it, there's also this piece of drivability that I think doing the average, the driving around when they're doing that, they used to do PCI, they'd get out with a checkboard, they'd take a certain segment of the road and then analyze it and come up with the number. Now most of it's driven, it's laser, it's AI.
Yeah, that machine bouncing, right, yeah.
Which is, I think you're gonna get a better PCI, cause I've been in towns that say they have an 80 PCI and their roads are no better than ours. They're about like ours or sometimes worse. And so PCI is a number that I'm always just a little skeptical when it comes out, but it's a good number. It's a good engineering number, but that drivability may be more or as important as we deal with our residents. And so we'll have to weigh those. Again, PCI is a great one for engineers because that's and it's great for cities because we can measure it. It's not a qualitative thing, it is quantitative, but there is that
I just wanted to,
qualitative.
this is for the mayor and Teddy, 'cause you guys weren't here when we were going through all this, but, they gave us a target budget number to maintain that PCI standard. And it was over 3 million a year we should be spending in the dollars.
Just in maintenance.
And in the pennies on the dollar, $3 million to do it. we're only spending half that next year. And so we're already behind, and it just means that we're going faster down that slope, and there's gonna be more expenses for roads down the road. I mean, you know what I mean?
Every year we fall far behind.
Yeah, and so it's just, it's another ballooning cost that's not right now, but it's something that is coming.
In the study that Councilman Shields is referring to, it did point out we need around 3 million. They did have inflated unit costs in there that we were seeing, actually we're experiencing a lot lower unit numbers for slurry seals, heavier seals, and then also the mill and overlay and that.
So we're not as far behind as.
We're not as far behind. And so they were, and then also they were recommending a higher level of treatment than was really necessary. Then some of the roads, they were saying that if it's a 50, you need to do a mill and overlay. When, working with other consultants, they're saying, well, you might just be able to do a type 3 slurry seal with a heavier aggregate and be able to prolong those, especially on residential roads where you might not have to do a mill and overlay. You could do a heavier treatment and still be able to preserve that road. So, as we went through that study, we felt like we might be able to bring that budget number down to be able, and still be able to try and meet that standard. And so that's essentially kind of what we put that, set our budget on. And then this next study we'll perform, we'll kind of see how that worked out and say, well, maybe we need to step it up a little bit more.
Yeah, if we drop down to a 62 or
If
something.
we drop drastically, then obviously we need to make some changes, but.
Okay.
So one of the biggest problems that we had early on was the roads had a really good drivability because they were a lot newer roads, right? The problem with that is in the first 3 years, you get a lot of oxidation that comes from the sun. And it removes the oil out of the asphalt, it becomes brittle. Now it starts cracking and it starts having problems. But early councils were like, well, we don't really wanna spend a whole bunch of money on pavement preservation, the roads are nice. And so it kind of catches up with you if you don't play that. And that's why this illustration you see, they recommend putting it on every 5 years and it holds that level of quality up there, right?
Absolutely.
So that's one of the things that have got us where 6,000 is and 56, where those roads have now dropped down below
50s, yeah.
Now it's time to do some more serious repairs on those roads.
What's the process? So I've been asked four different residents, why don't we cement or pave like 56 West from the intersection to the stop sign or certain sections of that heavier use traffic?
Yeah.
I know it's expensive.
The initial costs are expensive. If you ever have to cut into the road and repair it, those are a lot more expensive. And I don't know, Blake, you've dealt with concrete a lot.
You did some really weird transitions too between the asphalt.
When you do the
This isn't-
transitions, the
yeah, this-
asphalt pushes often, so you're constantly trying to keep that, unless you do an approach slab like a bridge, which just adds more and more cost. I did some work in the private sector where I had to come in and do development along those roads. It's a lot more traffic control, you have to put panels in and they settle differently, it's a lot of different specialized work that if you're set up to do it, it's good to go that way, I think, but you gotta get set up with all the right equipment.
In the last downturn, actually, there was a moment when concrete was the same price or slightly cheaper than asphalt. And so in other cities, I mean, we put in those, but you have to put, if you don't put the approach bridge on it, you'll see it down
Yeah.
on, like at 134th and, where you get that
Yeah,
asphalt
asphalt.
bounding up.
Yeah.
And so you have there's a bigger problem with that as well. So it's,
Constantly have to go.
Sentinel will be that way too in a few years, I'm sure.
asphalt is a
Yeah.
good material because it's easy to patch, it's fairly flexible, it needs a certain amount of driving. The base is key, I think when you see new roads falling, it's probably because the base wasn't
Like
done
out here, I was surprised
properly.
how bad these
Uh,
were.
Well, it was just
This
one of those
may
center
be because we've
medians
got the
too,
center
right?
medians and
Yeah.
we're
All
watering,
the water
too
intrusion.
much water.
Take
So
out the
the-
grass.
So really what that comes to, and Justin hit this when he said, you can have a road of 50 and they say you have to rebuild it, or you can do this. There are a lot of ways to get to that 50% PCI ranking, so that's why I say it's a good number for us, but
There's
Each of
70
these
roads
roads
that
has
aren't
to
as
be looked at.
drivable, there's 70 roads that aren't as drivable as 50 roads.
But you have to look at that road specifically, and that's what Bryce and the engineering team has to go out and say, with the consultants, what is the appropriate treatment? Even though there's a hard, fast rule at 50, we should be doing mill and overlay, it might not need it. You could have a 70 road that, if you're gonna fix it, you're gonna mill and overlay it, cause maybe it's the wrong asphalt mix.
So now
It's too brittle, so you gotta get rid of it and get with one that will actually.
So let's take
better.
56 going past Walgreens. Can you mill just out the pothole areas, the drive lane areas and overlay that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that is a treatment.
Yeah, and we actually had the cost estimate done on a couple different treatments for that road, cause we knew it was coming up in a couple of years, just to get an idea. And they provided several different options. They went out, we had them go out and do cores to see what the base looks like and the asphalt thickness, to determine. And so, yes, the shoulders we might be able to keep, in the center lane, we might have to mill that center lane out just like you.
Yeah.
And repair the base and then put new asphalt down.
How's the base holding up? Is it
The base throughout portions of it, because it was done in different phases. Some of the base was in good condition and other areas, wasn't it
there's
wasn't
no
as thick.
warranty or anything on that either, right?
Go trade it in, get a new one.
Yeah.
So when we end up doing that, we might end up doing different
Couple
repairs in
different
different
methods also.
sections, just because that's what it's gonna take. So
No, I think that's great.
And so one of the other things that, just to kudos to the public works staff and engineering, they are trying some different approaches on the heritage rebuild that was done. We used that concrete, or I don't know what they call it, but
concrete treated base course.
concrete treated base course. Really, it's to deal with bases that are weaker. You're trying to improve them, because that's a residential road that, the fact that it failed after 15 to 20 years, that should never happen. So there was an issue with the base. So we're trying some of these things that are being used in other parts of the country to improve longevity of roads. And so the hard part is, you use that, you won't know how effective it is until you're 15 years. But as you go down, you'll see this one works better. You can start to deploy some of those treatments a little bit more regularly.
There's a lot more engineering going into that than what the developer did, so.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
A lot more thoughts on it.
And then, so this just kind of shows that this was an exhibit out of the 2019 evaluation we had done. As you can see, our average score was around 70 PSI. As you can see, we had, most of our roads are in that fair to excellent condition, right? The majority of them were in the good condition. So, the red, as you can see on there, are the roads that, like I said, people don't like to hear it, but we're just allowing them to fail, right? We're putting our attention on those, fair to good roads.
Right, red one. And obviously the age of the road matters a lot, right? So
Yeah.
that's why a lot of those are.
And what treatments were done or not done in the past.
Another thing that contributes to that really bad is, when you look at like Heritage, for instance, that's the single road in and out of that subdivision. Is they build the first phase, they build that front section, and then as additional phases come on, you have all those construction trucks that are now beating a
first
residential
3
road
years
that
are
wasn't
rough,
designed
yeah.
for that load capacity.
That's why it fails at different rates at different parts.
Like this subdivision here, that's. That Freeman?
That's Freeman, yeah.
That was an issue with how it was put in.
That's an engineering and structural issue, no doubt.
That's not very.
Okay.
No, it's not old enough that,
Rose Creek,
No, it's Freeman.
we're 20 years old,
Behind
really.
Mesa.
Got it.
And if you're in
We
that,
should be here at worst. These ones, it's an issue of how they're built. I think Monty hit it. You have so much heavy construction going over it, and then cutting it and fixing it, that they just.
Plus, it's all farmland for decades,
Yeah.
right? And so,
We have large veins of collapsible soils
Yeah.
that, sometimes they're down deeper than where they dig and where they inspect before they go out.
and they're not coring that deep too either. Most of them.
Sometimes it's 8 feet down and they're only going down 5 or 6 to give it analysis.
Yeah.
so here's kind of a map showing the history of the treatments we've done over the last 5 years. As you can see, we've hit a large portion of the city. And it's kind of broken up there in years. There's been, some years you'll see more than others, and, but that's because based on timing of when contractors were out, we pushed those funds like we did just recently to another year, and so more was done in, one year than another, but, like I said, we're a good majority, through the city. And then we'll do that analysis again once we kind of complete all of the roads after our fiscal year '24. And then we'll get a good idea of what our program is doing, and then it'll help us obviously program into the future and plan, so.
I know you did the road down at the end of 7300 last year, and I got a lot of people like, what are you doing? Why are you spending money on that? Why don't you fix the road? But then it was like, just trying to help them explain, because that way that road lasts longer.
That's exactly right.
Justin, can I ask a question too? My in-laws live off of 7800 South in West Jordan. That road has been tore up and redone. And it killed me, like, this is the first time it affected me like this, driving down Main Street here. We just did the treatment last year, coming up on, Main Street and, Rosecrest here. And now Come and Go comes through
Cuts in.
and cuts in, and suddenly that treatment's almost, not in a complete waste, but what level did they finish? Did the contractor require to bring any more? Cause now now it's not smooth even, cause there's.
So one thing that we've done, and I believe that cut, Blake, correct me if I'm wrong, but that cut has not hit a T-patch yet.
So it hasn't yet.
That's a good question. So
it's not done yet?
yeah, it's not done yet, so there's kind of two phases. So what we call a T-patch, which they cut out a little bit further from what their actual first cut was. And then they come back and mill over it down 2 inches and put new asphalt in. And that's supposed to eliminate the bump, and it's also supposed to eliminate a line that water can penetrate and go all the way down to the base.
Right.
And that has not occurred yet.
Okay.
But they
So-
can't do that till
That's on the
springtime though,
contractor,
right?
right? That's on.
Yes, that's on the contractor. And we require on a newly treated road for them to carry that the full width of the road. So if they only go halfway into the road, then they have to mill the whole width of the road, even though they didn't touch that, because we just had a treatment go down in the last 2 years or 3 years.
I was gonna say, 'cause that was,
It's
it
not
felt
done.
like a waste of money last year to now have them come through.
Yeah, and
And there's huge bonds on that too.
and it's unfortunate we can't foresee all the projects.
Oh,
coming
absolutely,
through,
like I
but-
said, that's why I felt it was like, it should have been on them to get it back to.
A few years ago, we had,
Our crystal ball
do
blew a
better.
long time
and
ago.
Chalmers came in up by the fire station, up in Rosecrest, and they put a bunch of utility cuts in the road, and we made them mill and overlay the entire road from Highfield down to Rosecrest. Or, one of those two. But they had to do that, so we've talked about moratoriums and on cutting the
Road cuts essentially, that you can't, if it's a brand new road, you can't cut it.
Or if you do, you have to mill and overlay the entire length of.
And we could do that until the legislature will change the rules.
Next year.
Good thing to bring up.
Not
Get
to,
it for 1 year.
not to belabor this conversation anymore.
There's still a couple weeks left to talk to them.
I know, Blake, when we were talking about the impacts of microtrenching on these roads, how much of an impact is that gonna have on the
So,
durability of these?
it's a good question. It might have some impact on it. If it's sealed up right, it'll be alright. I've talked with some of the other cities that are having like Google Fiber and things come in. They're taking the funds that they were gonna put on that road and holding them, and then all that trenching, they're charging a fee to the company that's doing it, a road cap fee, and that's going into the bucket of money too to do some surface treatments on these roads. So that's something we would probably look at doing, is charging ourselves a fee for a road cut permit that could go back in to surface treating these roads after. And then we'd have to just get the chemicals lined up so that the treatments were done after the installation was done, not
Do
before.
we need to put that into that?
So that'd be,
Yeah.
that should be something.
Well, actually, we probably should put that in for anybody who's doing micro trenching and.
Anything,
Say,
but-
hey, you have to pay, here's the fee, even if you have a franchise,
We
you
just-
gotta pay this fee to.
We are
Just got
working
the
on a
draft
fee,
of that.
because currently we don't have a fee for that. If we did apply it, it would be really, really high, and we might get challenged on that, so we're working on updating that fee right now.
Because if
just
they're
haven't gotten
approved
through that
vendor
yet,
or
but
have
that-
approved right away, they
We
can
just
do
got
that.
that draft, and that's gonna be.
We would still say because that's a cut, because they have to
They would have to-
repair it per our stuff.
I've read a lot of it isn't making sense to me, a lot of it did, so, there you go. I did it a few more
Sorry,
times.
Justin, sorry to.
No, you're fine. So the So some of the treatments that we did just this last year that weren't on the seal coat map were the mill and overlay and full depth reclamation that we did. Some of them were down at Copper Creek, Tuscany, and then obviously Heritage Place that we've mentioned before. And so these are some of those residential roads that, were down into the 20s and 30, PCI. And so we wanted to do, part of the reason we stuck these projects in was to get an idea on the cost. So that we can try planning for the future, and then just to see if what we did there will work. On these mill and overlays, we did a 2-inch mill on an edge mill, and then we were able to reestablish the ground so the water can sheet off to the curb instead of puddle in the center of the road. And so we worked through that, and I think the process that we put in place on the mill and overlays worked really well, and then the concrete treated base course that Nathan mentioned before went there. So hopefully we'll be able to see how that will hold up in the future. One thing I want to mention on these is anytime you do a mill and overlay or a full depth reclamation, it's required that you go through and update all of the ADA ramps. And so that adds to the cost of this as well. And so on all these projects, we updated all the ADA ramps through here. And each ADA ramp was about $6,000.
Oh, wow.
And so that's a high cost for.
Do you have to put the truncated domes in, or they?
So
just
some of them were percent slope.
Okay.
With the landings in front of the ADA ramp and then on the sidewalk as well. So we have to go through and evaluate all of those and see what improvements need to be made. And then the contractor has to make those improvements as well.
And it's because that standard changes, so right, you can have, Heritage is not that old of a street, it had ramps in most of the places it was supposed to have, they just weren't to standard now. So, and $6,000 a ramp, that's actually a pretty good price, sadly. It used to be about $1,500 a ramp, those are all ones around to replace. So it's just really flat, they're very, the specs are very unforgiving, they're very, precise, and, it is a new cost. Anytime you do an overlay of any sort or any sort of surfacing, there was a move at one point to try and, at the federal level, to make it, even the pavement preservation stuff, that they were trying to make that ADA, triggering ADA, but that so far has not changed in the last regulations, but.
What's the thickness of the sills sometimes?
The seal coats?
Yeah. Does it
So
get
some
up
of
a half
them,
inch or more?
well, it depends on, so a type 3 slurry is a 3/8 aggregate. And so you'll have, about a half inch total. A type 2 is a 1/4 inch slurry, type 1 is an 1/8 inch slurry or aggregate.
It is a slurry on purpose, because slurry is not required. If you call it a microsurface, which is what they originally started marketing them as, you have to do the ADA. So now they are
Terminology stuff,
type
yeah.
3 slurries.
And then the treatments that we'll do on the residential roads at that 3-year mark that I mentioned before is really just a spray on application. So it's a fairly thin coat, but it's almost like just putting sunscreen on, like Monty mentioned, is the environmental impacts to the asphalt or what, cause those deterioration in the first, 3 to 5 years. And then these are the, projects that we did in the summer or plan to do, coming up this year. You can see we're starting to hit, some of those roads to try and close the gap on everything. So as you can see, we have, some different seal coats that are going on these newer roads, the lighter treatments and the heavier treatments on the aging roads. And then on the arterials and collectors, we're doing a type 3 slurry, which is a heavier type treatment. So these are the upcoming roads that we'll do in the next 6 to 8 months. And then these are the improvements over the next couple years that you can see there. So like I said, we have a good process. Bryce has done an excellent job on taking the report we got and scheduling out these treatments based on, the PCI they had, and then also just trying to cover the entire city in that 5 to 6 year period so that we can start, our process over again. So these are the up and coming projects. And then obviously we add new roads every year. So in our equation for forecasting, we went back and looked over the last 10 years and did an average, and we increased about 4.3% asphalt every year as an average. So we built that into our forecasting, and then also a 3.5% inflation, which obviously now doesn't seem like it's high enough, but that's what we put in. Obviously, we'll make some adjustments based on that over the coming years, but that's how we kind of move through that forecast. Like I said, we've covered a lot of this. So, any questions?
No questions.
Just hurts.
Not anymore anyway.
So after the next evaluation, we may be coming back and saying, you know, we need to increase our budget, but until then, we'll continue on and bring that back.
Anybody got odds on that?
I'll take the over.
Yeah, me too.
No, we appreciate it, Justin. Thank you. Information we need.
Not we want, but we do need.
Okay, item 2.6, legislative update. Roundtable discussion.
We just, it's the standard, item on here if you wanna talk about it, and we're at a record number of bills.
Insane amount of
They
bills.
introduced a bunch today.
What are we up to? Are
At
they in the
this point, you
600s?
can't.
No, I think we're almost at
500, over 500?
We're well over 500 in the,
In the house.
in the House,
Yeah, there
in the
was over
Senate.
1,500 bill files open when they said that at LPC last week.
Yeah, it's,
Oh my gosh.
I think we're at Senate, we're at 282, and the House, we're at 549.
We're gonna have mature legislation. They can
So
all
they
choose
get
to
any
piece
more,
of
we'll be
legislation.
over 550. Oh,
Yeah,
no, we're
that's
551, it looks like.
Yeah, what's his name? What's the guy on LPC that's doing that? He said that only once or twice has ever
Oh,
remembered
Roger.
getting this. Yeah, Roger.
552, they introduced some more, 4:56 PM.
That's okay, that's great.
Well, it gets to the point where you can't keep up with.
Well, and they can't keep up with it either, it's a dumb thing.
That means
There's
they have
no
to
way
be
they know what
reading-
they're voting on.
More than 12 bills a day.
Oh, yeah, they're definitely.
There's no
With
way
all
they
of their
can possibly
meetings
know
and
what
everything
they're,
else
what
that's
they're
going
voting
They're
on.
reading their own bills.
They're not even reading their own
So-
bills.
Sometimes.
So that's their, yeah, I'm not sure they're reading their own bills.
282 Senate bills.
Yeah, there's a lot, then you have all the joint resolutions, there's a lot going on. I think the league's tracking over 240, so we're trying to keep up on those ones that are important. We do have one, up on the shared services tomorrow you talked about with Councilman Shelton, so.
Are they gonna move forward on asking the mayor the governor to veto that bill that they passed on the gravel district, on the gravel pit thing?
I don't know if they're, where they're at with that.
We missed LPC. Did they kind of talk about that?
Yeah,
It's a
they're gonna
big,
try and
yeah.
push for a veto.
And then the
It
league,
was,
Oh,
that's right,
the
we did hear
exemption
him say
from
that.
that, yeah,
the
that's right.
standard gravel.
Cause
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
not, it
Because
was
it
not.
sets a precedence is the biggest problem
You just
with it.
carve out
I've
something you
taken
don't
money
want.
from another city that, well, this is impacting us, so we want you to give some money to us for it. Really sets a strong precedence for that. And they felt like it was terrible process in that they were uninformed of what the impact would be and they still voted on it anyway.
That 294, the league sent an email out about that today.
Oh,
That's the budget transparency
Oh,
that
yeah.
we're really trying to oppose.
it's just, it's not going to, it's going to give a false idea. And I think the league put it out there, if you grow by 500, our costs are not linear like growth might be, right? When you add an officer, that's not necessarily you have to do it in groups often, or if you're adding streets, and so it gives kind of a wrong impression. And I think the part that probably irks the most is that they excluded themselves.
Yeah.
What?
It's like that.
Candace is a co-sponsor.
Yeah, the OPMA, right?
I know.
We can't meet together, but they got a whole room at the house just for one party to meet together.
The house last year, the house was all for it this year, so
A secret.
it's really the Senate.
I do wanna point out in SB 231, it's a grandma bill by Bramble. He's fixing several issues that we've recently had with our favorite friend here in Harriman. where we were in litigation on this case. I don't know if you've seen the bill.
No, I've heard
Yeah.
about it.
What is it, HB what?
231.
SB 230.
SB.
The league is in support of it, and it's nice to have some clarifying language on what is a denial and what's not. And that you can't bring a cause of action without exhausting your administrative remedies, which is already law, but you also can't bring up anything new in district court if you didn't bring it up in the administrative appeal process.
Thank you.
So, there's a new short-term rental bill. This is HB 496. This one's interesting. It states that if you have a short-term rental ordinance, you have to adopt certain provisions that the legislator is mandating. Such as you have to have a local contact in the area that lives within 60 miles, and a municipality can reduce that to whatever they want to. That the local contact and the homeowner have to take classes that's approved by the municipality. You have to have
To be
certain.
a short-term landlord?
Yep. You have to have certain safety requirements, including restricting the number of people in a home. Having appropriate smoke fire detections, which I think is a no-brainer, but it also prohibit multiple nightly rentals in one home, meaning that you can't have rooms that you're renting out.
To subdivide the house, yeah.
Yeah, but these are legislative issues. It would be my argument is that if a council deems that as a sufficient regulation, then the local municipality should make that decision, not a force from the legislative body, the legislatures on what they think is an appropriate ordinance for cities to enact. Related is SB 290 or 271. Related in that it's not short-term rentals, but it talks about co-ownership of homes. Cities, I talked to Moab a couple days ago, maybe it was last week, about their some of their ordinances, and they brought up that co-ownership is the new issue. It's not short-term rentals because they prohibit them. It's 10 people buying one house. So you're a 10th owner, and so this bill prohibits cities treating co-ownership homes differently than any other type of home. So just to kind of keep your eyes on. Another one, last one, 250, well, go ahead.
Oh, never mind. You don't know. I'm saying it's a timeshare.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I mean,
say the same thing.
It's like a boat share, timeshare.
I don't
Or they
understand
sell
why
them, they
that
sell
has
them a
to.
lot up in Park City.
Yeah,
It
St.
is.
George too.
It's the destination areas that, we can't have short-term rentals, but people want, there are certain people that want short-term rentals to offset their costs, but still visit that home. And if they can't do that, then they might as well be a 10th owner in a home where they can still visit. So they're trying to,
So you can get your 5 weeks a year, yeah.
yeah, so it's just another way to try to prohibit those type of
They're
potential
expensive.
issues. Yeah, yeah, they are. Last one, public surveillance is SB 250. This is from Dan McKay. This would prohibit governments from having public networks of surveillance footage. And this, which couldn't be used in like any type of criminal trial. So in other words, if you have a security camera at a park, you wouldn't be able to use that security camera for evidence.
Why?
I don't know.
That makes no sense.
Cause of suspicions, but yes.
Why you have
Yeah.
What?
Their
See out
privacy
tagging
rights.
at night doesn't wanna be seen, like what is going on here? You know?
How would that work in school districts though too, right? It'd be similar, 'cause it wouldn't, like,
Any governmental entity
Wow.
from implementing technology.
But isn't that why you have them?
Yeah.
My-
So
that's,
Just
you're
guts
thinking
all of
logically
that.
now.
What?
So
What's the number on that?
250
SB two
Am I
fifty?
confused?
from your buddy.
I mean, why wouldn't, isn't that part of the reason you have cameras?
Part of it is this private entity thing where you have a third party monitoring everything. It's really just a bad bill, but
Yeah.
I think he's trying to
I don't know the goal there. be honest with you.
I don't know. He does talk about a private entity can't,
It says
you can't
or,
use a private entity.
or to
yeah.
contract, so it's, you
Yeah,
can't have it and
You
you
can't
can't contract.
contract. Yeah, it's just a
So
bad
then,
bill.
next thing, body cam footage.
Yeah.
Right, which he introduced.
Yeah. So.
Governmental entity, but you can't use that for prosecution? What?
You're required to have it, but then you can't use it.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's for the officer's safety.
That's crazy to me, that's, I mean,
So that one's a little
maybe
bit
you should
concerning.
have to post that you're being videoed or something, so
And that's in
people
our
know.
policy.
Yeah, but other than that, I don't, that's crazy to me.
I'm gonna call him and ask.
Sean Guzman brought up a good point, cause they have an airport in St. George that the city manages, and they, have, a lot of concerns on this bill, cause they do use their security footage from the airport all the time. So, I don't think they have cameras elsewhere in the city like in parks.
But even like UDOT cameras or something, right, for fatalities or anything like that, that just would blow my mind.
Yeah.
So next the language will be.
Or if somebody leaves a bag of junk on the front steps of City Hall, you know?
Did they
Local,
make
you
co-sponsor with him or just?
Not yet.
Just, okay.
Drafting, nothing.
It's not,
It's new though,
yeah,
it didn't get moved forward the last time it was up.
and they just didn't consider it yet, so I don't know.
But that was just on Monday, or yesterday.
Well, yeah, Tuesday, so that, I don't, it's still sitting out there.
It's not on the current agenda for their stuff.
So.
Those libertarian things shouldn't be allowed to be recorded. I don't know.
So just a few things to keep in mind, so it's still going and we're gonna have a record number of bills. And they're not satisfied with setting the record, they're going to crush the record this year.
That'll be number 6.
More rules.
Well, and there'll be 50 that come out next to the last day, you know?
And they skip all the process,
Right.
They suspend the process.
suspend the rules.
Wait, would you hold a bill to the last, so you could, no.
Is anybody else able to join me tomorrow morning with school out? There's no donuts and grown-ups now tomorrow.
And
Yeah,
you can do it remotely, when you go, you just have to raise your hand, they don't always pick you, as I've discovered.
And that's okay, like I said, if you could be on, if you wanna be online, that's great too, we can kind of make a point to, Jordan can make a point to emphasize that we have.
Are you going up in person?
No, I think it's a good idea to minimize the leadership of law enforcement there, because
Yeah, we
it's,
talked
it
about,
really is a.
I think the elected officials are gonna be much
Some elected
stronger in this, we
leadership.
talked about it a little bit,
Can you, would it be, effective at all if you did like a joint, statement
Memorandum or statement.
from our council, so you're speaking on behalf of all of our
If
council?
you're okay with that, I can work with Chief and Cody tonight, real fast, and try to get together a joint statement.
Cause I know I can't go tomorrow morning, but I'd be glad to put my name on just a joint statement so that it's.
Yeah,
Cause I think you did write an email about it before that summarized a lot of the key issues and not only the budgetary issues, but there's further constitutional issues that are of concern too, but I think if you could really summarize that.
I think the most powerful thing is if somebody from the legislative branch of the city speaks.
Yeah.
Well, I'll be there to speak. I mean,
Not
that's
as-
why I'm just,
I mean,
But if you're there to speak and then he speaks on, is it
Yeah.
powerful if he speaks on all of our
I think it
behalf,
could-
that
yeah.
it's in
Well, I
support
think
of
it would
the,
be.
of the council?
Yeah.
Cause I'm very
guessing it's
supportive of signing on to that.
it'll be towards the end.
Is it an 8 o'clock committee?
It's an 8 o'clock.
It's an
committee.
8 o'clock committee, but it's like it's
Yeah,
towards the end of the
yeah.
agenda.
So the likelihood of a lot of
No
people
worries.
being able to speak is probably poor anyway.
Yeah, they're
I
gonna,
don't
Do you have
If
the
If it's a
room
long
number?
committee, they'll start to minimize that.
so
Yeah.
so
The chair will
the,
pull it and say 5 people.
That's
So
usually what
they'll say
happens when you
5
get up there and
and-
there's 5 people that get to talk and say you drove up there for nothing.
so I do think last time they had them raise hands, so who's for it and who's opposed?
They
And
take
so
some from each side.
they have to take some from
Yeah.
each side, because otherwise they
Yeah.
they'll stack it like
That
they
was
did their
Wilcox
committee.
committee.
374, right, Chief?
Are the rest of you good to
I can possibly be there, we'll see.
I know I can't be there, but just go knowing that you have get the whole voice of the
Yeah,
council,
council's-
right, Steve, you're good, right?
Yeah, I think I can. I mean, I can be up there.
Okay, I know I can't, but I'll send my voice. So it's just us.
It's a standing committee.
210 Senate Building.
210.
So I think that's
So
where
it's the big
LPC
room.
is.
It's the
Right.
big
Yeah,
room.
where
LPC
LPC is.
Okay. Okay.
How long is that?
And
Is it 2 hour or no?
They're done, I think they only have 1 hour.
Is it only an hour?
Yeah, it's,
Oh, it's number 10.
they'll have to
10, I don't know.
Let's
bounce
say
it
if they're
quick.
gonna say 2 people, 4 to go, I guess, that's all it's gonna talk, I mean.
But Representative, Tusher will speak, and if he knows you're there, he can point out that you're there.
Yeah.
What is it? 374.
So it's it's item number
10.
10 on the agenda.
There's only 11 items on the agenda, alright.
Yeah, it's,
Even if they're 10 minutes apiece, that's not till 9:30, 9:40.
But they're only an hour long.
Let's see how long it's.
The whole meeting.
yeah, I don't think it's, I think
I think it's
it's
about an hour.
about an hour is all they give themselves.
And they bail out pretty quick on time because they have to be over to the chamber.
Okay, I'll plan on being there.
Is it 10 really?
They have 10 AM, they have,
My penny sleeps, let's go.
there's some other committees at 9, and then they have a Senate chamber,
Oh.
so.
It hasn't helped yet.
Brother, let me tell you.
I got them all night
Those
long.
are just depending on how controversial the other line items are.
Yeah.
Alright.
part of it.
So you're gonna need to get me
Anything else?
We
then?
do have a few.
Okay, I'll look for a motion
I get
to,
enough
someone
sleep.
wanna read the motion for close?
Motion to temporarily recess city council meeting to convene in closed session for the purpose to discuss pending or reasonable imminent litigation and the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property as provided by Utah Code annotated section 52-4-205.
Motion by Steve. Second by Terry. All, nope, roll call. Teddy?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Well, yes. Jared?
Yes.
First time he's ever voted yes.
Cause he's laying flat.
He's high, he doesn't know.